Welcome, everyone, to Indications and Warnings with Chuck Farrer, co-produced by Alan Brewer. Chuck and I are recording this show on January 6, 2025. It is day 1048 of Russia's full-scale genocidal invasion of Ukraine. Chuck, the great thing about this show is we're going to pick up practically where we left off with the surprise in Kursk just a couple of days ago.
Absolutely. And, was that odd or was that God? We were pretty much recapitulating the latest developments in Kursk up to the invasion. We didn't know that was going to happen, but we were able to do the sort of Kursk roundup. Did a couple of posts today, which Thomas, our executive producer, will be putting in here. I did one very large scale map, and a large scale basically means the stuff you want to look at gets smaller and smaller. It shows the relationship of the Kursk offensive and what's going on today, and to the relationship of what's in play and where the Russian city of Kursk is, and just west of that, if you are looking at the 1820 UTC 6 January map, you can also see where the Kursk nuclear power plant is. Second map, which will be more to our purposes here with Alan and I, is the 1900 UTC map of 6 January. And I have taken a very close look at where the offensive is happening, heading towards a town called Bolshoi Soldatskoy, which basically means really big soldier is the best translation I was able to get. So an interesting destination.
You know, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense calls this a counteroffensive, but we don't really know if it's a counteroffensive. It's a little too early to know what the makeup of the forces are, what the aim is, and it may simply have been triggered by this terrible casualty suffered by the Russian and North Korean troops announced by General Sursky a couple of days ago, 38,000 casualties. That must have given Ukraine some kind of opening.
Yeah, and what I think is likely happened there, the fighting in the Kursk salient was predominantly to the west, not always, but the heaviest fighting, and where the bulk of North Korean forces were committed. The general consensus on information was that they were fighting in the west. I don't doubt that their casualties have been heavy for a lot of reasons. The language barrier, the lack of training, the lack of interoperability, tactical ineptitude on the part of the North Koreans, who have no idea how to fight in open country. They are not supported. They're not involved in mechanized attacks. These guys are fixing bayonets and charging across bean fields. You know, that works exactly as well now as it did during the American Civil War. So that isn't so good. But I think what Alan is alluding to, these casualties were suffered in the West. They had to be made up. It's not hard to intuit that the Russians had to move some troops around, and that meant weakening their eastern flanks, and that meant an opportunity for the Ukrainians.
For this to truly be a counteroffensive of some size and force, the Ukrainians might also have had to build up their forces in Kursk. We've seen no evidence of that, but what we heard once again is that the Ukrainians surprised the Russians. The Russians had no clue the Ukrainians were going to strike out along the 38K004. No clue whatsoever.
Yeah, and one of the things that we are hearing is an uptick in the capability of Ukrainian electronic warfare. We are hearing reports that come in, concurrently with contact information that Russian drones are having a really hard time targeting, operating, transmitting video, prosecuting attacks because the electronic warfare capability of the Ukrainians seems to have grown. I think one of the things contributing to the element of Ukrainian surprise, well, first of all, their operational planning is superb. They understand that deception is a fundamental necessity in offensive operations. The dispersion of their forces, their better planning, the ability to concentrate a force and project it, not mill around in big groups for a week waiting for the brief. But I think this uptick in electronic warfare capability that came in the preparatory stages, and that precluded or diminished Russian tactical awareness, if not shutting down their reconnaissance completely.
And it led to a daily record of Ukraine destroying Russian drones, over 175. I'm just going to guess that dozens and dozens of those drones were right here in Kursk. And we're talking about all kinds of drones and the importance of electronic warfare to interrupt reconnaissance drones that might be directing artillery fire, obviously to take suicide drones right out of the air and drones with loitering munitions to redirect them. So this powerful use of electronic countermeasures, it's not as good as air covered supplied by our Air Force, but it's almost as good.
Yeah, and we're talking 175 drones downed in a 24-hour period. So we're looking at like 6, 7 drones an hour, 5, 6, 7 drones an hour. That's a significant capability, right? And the best thing a drone can do is give you information, and information is more important a lot of times in conducting offensive operations. You got to know what's going on, and it looks like Ukraine has been able to really inflect the aerial electronic environment. So remind everybody that the drones operate like an upside down wedding cake. The first person drones have invert the cake so that the smaller top version, and then it spreads out to the longer endurance drones that can also be attack drones, but they have longer endurance. And then you have the drones that operate at a higher level. They can pinpoint targets, they can designate targets, they can direct moving targets. And Ukraine is now getting to the point with, I don't want to say artificial intelligence, but let's say the algorithms have evolved to the point where some of these longer endurance drones are functioning like miniature AWACS. They have the total system awareness, and they can prosecute targets and divert aerial assets. The Russians don't have anything like that. Every Russian drone has got a zit-faced Russian little murderer sticking his tongue out and making that thing fly. So, we're seeing the success of a lot of things coming together.
Yep, patience, planning, operational security. Those are 3 key things that Ukraine operates by all the time. But truly, right now in Kursk, not a lot of news has come out of Kursk today about what the Ukrainian aims are or what their current situation is. But I think it's safe to say the nuclear power plant is not their target, although people, for some reason, love to mention that every single day.
They really do. And, of course, there is the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is not only under the control of the Russians, but they have absolutely wired it with tons of explosives. Now, would it be nice for Ukraine to have a similar asset? Probably. Would that be my number one objective if I were the area commander here? No, it absolutely wouldn't. In fact, I would even bring this back and suggest this. The whole Kursk operation, the whole Kursk incursion is essentially designed to divert Russian attention, command bandwidth, assets, manpower, material, and to be a thorn in Putin's side. Sole purpose of the operation. And as long as you're there, you'll achieve varying degrees of success in all of these, uh, in all of these detriments to the Russians. But Alan and I, you talked about this for years. One of the principal problems with the Russian military is the inability of their high command, their bandwidth is extremely limited. They, all of the nations that emerged from communist dictatorship, and the Chinese to this day are resisting it. They're not into joint operations. They don't want everybody putting their heads together. They want everyone in their own silo. And modern warfare is a joint operation, right? In the US military, we say a dedicated purple suiter because the Army wore green suits, the Navy wore navy blue, and the Air Force wore blue. And to be a purple suiter meant you thought like a joint staff officer. And that takes time.
Yeah, it does take time. The other thing to mention about the electronic warfare is that it really does permit Ukraine to conduct combined arms maneuver in Kursk, and it appears this is exactly what they are doing. We know that the counterattack actually was preceded by Ukrainian sappers clearing minefields. So that's step one if you're going to conduct combined arms maneuver right there.
Yeah, and so it can entail a lot of things, but I think a lot of this is a 4 to 6 man special operations patrol, or let's call it 12 men. You've got a group that is providing overwatch, and you go forward on your belly with this plastic knife, and the mines are buried here. You want to stick your knife in sideways, not, you don't want to do it like this. But I encourage our Russian guests, please try that because you will find every mine you're looking for that way.
You'll find one.
You'll find one. But, so you take advantage of what you've got. In the case of Ukrainians, you've got the night. So you use the night for those operations because the Russians are, to all extents and purposes, pretty much hapless at night, which is why we see their daylight attacks come to grief.
Well, it's the middle of winter. There's only about 8 hours of daylight in Kursk in Ukraine right now, and the weather in Kursk, which I took a look for, it's not deadly cold. In Fahrenheit, it's 26 degrees, intermittent snow, rain. Actually, by Friday during the day, the temperature going all the way up to 47 degrees and rain on Thursday. So this is not the deadly chill of Ukrainian winter, but the ground is snow covered, not deep in snow, but it's damn cold to crawl across a minefield in the middle of the night when it's 20 or 25 degrees.
Yeah, and I would say some of the most miserable conditions I ever operated in were from like 35 to 40 degrees when it was raining.
Yeah.
That's really tough. It's not tough for the first hour, the second hour, the third, but the eighth, ninth, 12th, it's tough.
The other thing that's possible here, I suppose, is that with those 38,000 casualties, Ukraine saw an opportunity here to do exactly what you and I have talked about, which is punch the Russian force in the face and see how they respond to it. I think a lot of Russians did turn tail.
Yeah, there have been the number of surrenders. It's between 5 and 20 a day, and we have had units the size of full company surrendering at once. That's happened more than once, 100 or so guys. I watch very carefully, and I encourage everyone else, when you look at the group of surrendered, sometimes Ukraine will put the picture up. if you're looking at a group of about 10 people, they probably surrendered as a unit. If you see less than five, they could have been individual surrenders. But by the time you get to 10, 12, that's telling me it's a unit. If you get to 30 guys, that's telling me it's a platoon. Um, we're probably, uh, Russia's got the problem now, right? They got beat up in the West, and very likely they moved people over there. They are very single-minded, and that's bad. You can't get target lock. That, you hear fighter pilots talking about it, SEALs talk about it. Don't get target lock. The world is going on. You're on this one track. It's not working. And I think there's a little bit of rope-a-dope here. The fighting was in the West, and the Russians thought that's where the pay dirt was, and Ukraine busted out literally the back door. And the good thing about the Ukrainian advance here, it's centered on the 38K 004. They've got they've got their ground line of communication and supply. And as you were pointing out earlier, Alan, you look around there and the road situation for the Russians isn't all that good.
No, it's not. It's country lanes, as you call them. And when we look at the zoomed in map here, the 1900 UTC map, Chuck, uh, driving down that 38K 004, but across terrain that looks pretty defensible, and there seems to be some water courses here before you reach Bolshoye Soldatskoye. So a pretty defensible area for Ukraine to move into.
It really could be. If people are looking at the map, there are two contact icons. And if you look at the 38K 004, it's going up, and there is a place where the road crosses a river. And it looks like the road dips down, and then there is a bluff on the northeast side. I would really want to capture that if I were the Ukrainians. That's exactly the kind of operation where you'd I'd like to send a couple of platoons, get to that bridge, hold on to it, and follow it up quickly close by with a mobile air defense asset, surface-to-air missile. Again, everything starts from the top, folks. Everything, air defense, electronic warfare, air superiority. You want all that stuff. So when you look up in the sky above you, you own it. That's what you want.
And when you look back at the wider scale map, Chuck, if the Russians have broken out of their target lock, you can see, as you like to say, if they were to redeploy forces from the west over here to the east northeast to meet the Ukrainian counterattack, they have to go all the way around the barn. I mean, look at how far they have to travel to move those troops. So, if there was a redeployment giving Ukraine an opening here, they have, I would say, a couple of days of advantage here to do what they want.
Yeah, absolutely. And there has been an uptick. We don't have access anymore to the number of Ukrainian aviation strike missions per day. Earlier in the war, they were putting that out there. They're not anymore. But so I have to look at video and think what's going on. I've seen a recent video, and it must have been 20 or 30 aviation strike munitions using the French Hammer guided bombs. A lot of the fighting is going on here in Kursk. So this is telling me, and this is through acts of valor on the Ukrainian Air Force, they're actually carrying out close air support missions or tactical airstrikes in Russia, right, against Russian targets. And with this uptick in, anti-drone electronic warfare, we might also suspect that there are other other electronic warfare endeavors as well. The Russians more and more are using their largely very primitive glide bombs, right? I don't know this, but I would strongly intuit this, and if I were a Russian, I would write this up as a memo, and I would say it's very likely that our glide bombs are going to be interfered with. So, from our lips to God's ears.
When you think what might be ahead for this Ukrainian counteroffensive in Kursk, Chuck, uh, what's the low-hanging fruit that's available for them here, or what is their most aspirational goal with this particular move to the northeast?
Yeah, you know, I really have to have some battlefield intelligence here. I'd have to know some enemy order of battle. That's why I put up the really large scale one to show people where Kursk is in relation. We can see that it's pretty far away. If we get to Bolshoi, we're just moving up the 38 K 004. That is the major ground line of communication for all Russian operations addressing the eastern side of the Ukrainian salient. So Ukraine doesn't have to push too much farther up that road to really put a ding in it. Right now, they're not threatening Kursk, the city of Kursk.
No.
I'm not sure that's even a decent objective. There was a Civil War expression, which I always loved. It was called putting the bulge on. And so this would be putting the bulge on Kursk. So, the other thing is you seem to have the possibility to be going towards Kursk. It triggers all these cascading civil defense things, the hoo-ha, the people moving out, and, you get a benefit from that because it isn't just the tactical situation here. This is a political problem as well, and a civil problem. So between you and me, do I think they're going to Kursk? I don't think so. But again, Ukrainian intelligence is pretty good, and maybe the Russians are spread a lot thinner than we know, and they would want to take advantage of that.
Well, after 38,000 casualties, you're going to be spread pretty thin. Now, the Russian civil authorities have ordered evacuations from around Kursk and from Bolshoi Soletskoye. So if the first aim of the Ukrainians is to disrupt not only the Russian and North Korean units who are fighting in Kursk, but to disrupt the civil authority, I think we can say they've achieved that already.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there is a highly desirable road junction, which is most of the way to Kursk, and that's where the 004 meets the 0117. So locking that up would be pretty good. But, the other thing is you don't have to actually occupy the intersection, right? You just need to get your artillery within range of that intersection. So that would be highly desirable as well. And every millimeter of Russian territory you possess, face it, there's going to be a mediated settlement sometime. And I'm not recommending that to be anytime soon. But eventually, hanging on to some Russian dirt is going to be important. And the more you hang on to, the better you've got it.
Well, this Kursk incursion started back in August, early August, of course. And as you've reminded us, Chuck, the Ukrainians originally occupied about 1,000 square kilometers. In the last few months have lost about 50% of that. But that could also have been by design. You know, the Ukrainians, I think, have planned this incursion and are that smart. They occupied an area and were also fully prepared to fall back to prepare defensive lines. Remember, engineering forces were a big part of the deployment into Kursk.
Yeah, they really came equipped and they knew what the long game was. They took Sudza within, I don't know, 12 hours, 15 hours. That was always going to be the logistical base. You can see Sudza is you and I have talked about what are desirable military objectives. Sudza certainly is. There are one, two, three, four, five major highways branching out. Each one of those highways, the 030, the 024, the 0004, these are the main circuit cables for each quadrant of the Ukrainian salient. So, you know, what two things were that stood out in the original order of battle of the invasion? It was the large number of combat engineering troops and the extra large number of special forces, which they used to push forward, sowing confusion as they went. Some of them were, good thing about special operations force, it can last as a self-contained unit for varying lengths of time. Everything else has to be plugged in, right? But the SOF guys can go sort of over the horizon, conduct their operation, and come back. And so, of that 1,000 square kilometers taken at the high point, I think all they really wanted is what they've got right now, which is about 450 square kilometers. And those highways we just mentioned, 38K, 030, 024, 0004, they got it. Those, they control ground lines of communication. And as you just said, these are interior lines. The Russians got to ship it.
Yeah. I mean, the more you look at the Kursk incursion, I think the more brilliant it seems in the planning and the patience. And also remember, General Syrskyi was in Kursk on December 30th, apparently not only handing out commendations to Ukrainian soldiers, but no doubt reviewing the final plans for this run up to the northeast. And it was over that weekend, December 30, 31, that Syrskyi announced to the press of the 38,000 Russian and North Korean casualties. So, you look back a little bit and then you understand the reasons for some of Syrskyi's travels.
Yeah, that's there are no morale boosting trips on the Russian side. It doesn't happen. Putin is never going to tour the dugouts at Christmas time. It isn't going to happen. Or you've got President Zelensky, who's gone to Chasiv Yar,
Yeah.
right? He's gone to the very front. He's in some places that I'm sure his protection detail is tearing their hair out.
With a few kilometers, 10 to 15 kilometers of the front line in many cases.
Yeah. So this was a well-planned operation. There is a point to it. I don't know what the point is yet. I mean, I don't know. Was this an opportunistic attack? How weak are the Russians over here? Is this a feint? Is the big punch coming? And, to our Russian listening guests, please consider all of these possibilities because they are important. And the great thing is, if you and I are left guessing, believe me, the Russians are left guessing.
And the big punch might not be coming in Kursk. The big punch could be coming someplace else entirely.
Entirely. And remember, this is Mike Johnson, a guy who one day I'll have a beer with. Only one of us is going to leave with teeth. This is all his fault. And all during 2024, Ukraine needed politically to throw a punch.
Yeah.
It needed to do it. And it looked around the battlefield from Kupiansk to Kherson, and it couldn't find a place that would have answered all of the mail. And thinking completely out of the box and off the map, they said, look, if we take back Bakhmut, what is that? What does that even mean? Bakhmut was never anything to begin with. But somebody thought, let's take a bite out of Russia. And through no coincidence at all, they settled on Kursk, Sudza, the early gas transmission point, the layout of the highways, everything that only dawned on me slowly as I worked on these maps and labeled all the highways and looked, and it just came together. Look, the first thing you do in the military is you do the map study. You commit it to memory. Every junior officer, this is what you do. You read a map and you burn it into your head. They picked the best spot they possibly could.
Absolutely. They really did. And whoever had the sharp eyes and said this, take a look at this, and then they planned it out. That person gets tremendous credit for map reading number one.
Map reading 101.
Yeah. We're going to watch what's happening in Kursk just as closely as we can. As we said, not a lot of news is making its way out of Kursk, so we don't know a lot about what's happening. But I think the best thing is to know that the Ukrainians once again surprised the Russians. And when you come right down to it, the Ukrainians have no business surprising Russians in Kursk Oblast. It's Russian community, Russian people, Russian territory, and yet the Ukrainians once again took them by surprise.
Well, and the brave defenders of the Russian people are doing themselves no favors because they loot homes, they loot shops, they loot businesses. I understand the fine line of the necessity for an army to forage, right? Chickens get stolen. I mean, that happens. But they're stealing cars, agricultural equipment, washing machines, bathtubs, and there was just today another group of Russian citizens in Kursk Oblast reading a video saying that they needed to be protected from the Russian troops in their own country.
Right. That's obviously asking Ukraine, please come help us to fight against these North Korean and Russian troops who've occupied our homes. And actually, that's what the North Korean troops are doing, Chuck. There was a video posted of North Korean soldiers actually evicting Russian old people from their homes to find shelter from the cold and the weather.
Oh, my God. Well, to talk about how is the situation going in Kursk? Our latest numbers, and I'm sure it's higher than this now, but there was a Russian force of about 50,000 troops, so 2 divisions or so, plus or minus. 50,000 troops augmented, including in that number 10,000 North Koreans. That task unit has suffered 38,000 casualties. So quite a bit more than half of those people are no longer available for assignments. Ukraine's going to be here, Alan. I certainly thought all winter, and we're almost certainly going to make it to the spring.
Yeah, I would think so. Zelensky reported yesterday in his nightly speech that 15,000 killed in Kursk. So out of the 38,000 total casualty number, that's a very high kill rate. Makes sense because of the involvement of North Koreans. And as you say, Chuck, North Koreans are not riding into battle on infantry fighting vehicles. They are charging into battle with bayonets fixed. The equipment loss for the Russians here in Kursk and everywhere along the zero line is also calling into question whether Russians have sufficient equipment to conduct combined arms maneuver. They may have been wounded so severely in Kursk that they lost that capacity.
I think they have lost that capacity. We haven't seen it for the last 2.5 years at least, and probably into 3. I keep picking on this battle because I spent a week taking it apart, but you had a battalion-sized unit, which would simply be one little task element of combined arms maneuver warfare. And in Kupiansk, to get destroyed in 20 minutes. Right. So we wonder, why don't they roll the bone more often, the big bones? Alan, I morale, training, leadership faults, the training of officers. I'm going out on a limb here. Nobody should ever underestimate the enemy like this, but I'm firmly convinced, look, there is no big plan. There isn't going to be a summer offensive that threatens Kyiv. They're no longer capable of doing that. They can't do it. Now, can Ukraine do it? Yeah, but they've got to have all the piggy banks full, right? All the gas cans full, all the sandwiches packed. They need everything before they do it. And they were successful in Kursk because they had to squirrel that stuff away. And thank you, Mike Johnson. You did nothing to enable them to conduct offensive operations. In fact, you added a year to the war.
Yep. And sacrificed Ukrainian soldiers' lives, frankly, elsewhere.
It's infuriating.
Yeah. I'm going to throw a curveball at you here, Chuck. The first Ramstein meeting of 2025, which will be Mark Rutte's first as Secretary General of NATO, Lloyd Austin's final Ramstein meeting. It's occurring January 9, so just 3 days from now. Important topics on the agenda. Zelensky has pressed for additional air defense. I'm sure that at Ramstein, there will be updates about this Kursk counterattack. And I'm sure that there will be updates about the military supply that the Biden administration is attempting to deliver to Ukraine in the waning days of its administration. Probably a pretty important meeting. And as I say, Austin's going to be there in person. I don't know if Zelensky is attending in person, but as the first Ramstein meeting of 2025, in light of the Kursk counterattack, in light of all this talk about peace negotiations, and just 11 days before Trump takes the oath of office, it's a pretty significant meeting.
It's a pretty significant opportunity. It's time for me to play Grinch. I don't see the Biden administration doing anything, and I could choose different words here, but I'm choosing these. They won't do anything to redeem themselves, right? They are not going to do anything to right the wrongs. Our listeners know I have a personal animus against Jake Sullivan and even Secretary Blinken, and that animus is set off when I hear them congratulate themselves on all that they have done. It was last year at a Ramstein meeting where they promised a Patriot air defense complex. Guess where that is right now? No one knows, Alan.
Well, we know it's not in Ukraine.
We know it's not in Ukraine, so we could start. We maybe if we just start looking outside you, and that's infuriating to me. We still only have two Ukrainian pilots in training. We have not sent a single F-16 to Ukraine. Uh, I have a great admiration for General Austin, Secretary Austin. I know the kind of advice he is giving to the administration. It doesn't make it into the Oval Office. His advice is not being taken.
It hasn't been taken. I remember from time to time seeing how uncomfortable Lloyd Austin was in the aftermath of some of the Ramstein meetings, clearly dismayed with decisions that had been taken, clearly dismayed with decisions that had been postponed. And now I regard Secretary Blinken a little bit differently than you, Chuck. I think that Blinken and Austin work together to break through some of the indecision of the Biden administration, for example, about F-16s.
Right. Well, and I can talk all I want about F-16s, but we've always said this, you and I, look, it isn't a silver bullet, right?
Right.
It's not going to, those aircraft, even 10 operational squadrons are not going to win the war. What will help to win the war is making sure no more Ukrainian children are buried alive in their apartment buildings. That's important. I do not see why the United States finds it necessary to drag their feet when something as fundamental as protecting civilians in Ukrainian cities, and there is an important corollary to that. Ukrainian troops in the field are not defended. They don't have adequate air defenses either. And if they want to conduct large-scale ground military maneuver operations, they need better air cover as well. So, you and I have been how many Ramsteins have we done? 3, 4?
Oh, more than that, Chuck.
Yeah. And we're air defense, air defense, air defense.
Yeah, I think it's remarkable. 1,000 days into this war, air defense remains the number one need of Ukraine, not only to protect its cities, but to protect its troops, which is why I was so interested in the powerful use of electronic countermeasures in Kursk. I mean, maybe the Ukrainians have figured something out there. Again, we'll wait and see. But surprises keep coming from Kursk. Surprises keep coming from the Ukrainians, and we can expect more of these surprises throughout 2025.
Well, absolutely. And so many firsts in the last 1,000 days, right? For the first time in history, an unmanned naval combatant has shot down an enemy aircraft in combat. And it's likely what happened in that engagement that a modern fighter bomber was driven off, right? One aircraft was shot down, and we know that another one was severely damaged because we have the Mayday calls. Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So at first, Ukraine made the Western Black Sea a non-permissive environment. Then they compelled the Russians to evacuate all of their major surface combatants to the extreme edges of the Black Sea. Now it is no longer safe for Russian naval aviation to operate over the Western Black Sea. These are big steps, Alan.
Yeah, really big steps.
The Houthis are not forcing the U.S. Navy out of the Red Sea. You see where this is going? It's an incredible achievement.
Yeah. Oh, it really is. There's no question about that. And it was just earlier today I saw video footage released by the Ukrainian Navy, which only has these unmanned surface vessels. When you come right down to it, that is the Ukrainian Navy. Although, yes, they have some frigates and minesweepers in training in the waters around the UK and that kind of thing. But apparently a sea drone delivered a suicide drone. So this unmanned sea drone was something of a cargo vessel. Its mission was to carry a suicide drone to a launch position where it was sent against a Russian Pantsir in Crimea, and took it out. Again, it's just intuitive brilliance of Ukrainians always asking, what can a drone do? What can a drone do? What can a drone do? And they have come up with just remarkable answers. Drones to deliver drones to launch points, drones over the tree line to rain down fire, uh, drones assembled en masse on land to carry out an all drone attack on Russian positions, drones to carry wounded back from the front line, drones to drop mines along the roadside. There's no end to the creativity that Ukrainians bring to drone warfare.
Well, and it's even a broader technological sort of out of the box. They have adapted a cruise missile to deliver cargo. So, the warhead section is actually, you fill it full of whatever you need. And some things could be incredibly necessary. Night batteries for your night vision devices, radio, the plasma medicine. But when I heard that, I am thinking I need to support deep, deep covert operations in, deep within Russia. And I'm going to get them the stuff they need, quite literally, by a turbojet and rocket powered cruise missile. Holy smokes. That's out of the box.
That is really out of the box. No question about that. I can't wait to see that day. We should devote a whole show to drones at some point, Chuck, before the Ukrainians ask the drones to do the impossible once again. And
well, we've probably got 100 infographics on drones, and we could, blast them up and talk about them. And it's good to understand the capabilities that they have, and some of the roles that they play. Everything from decoying Russian fighters, because you've got the Mauled, for example. It's its own high performance little aircraft, and it makes the Russians think it's a fighter plane.
yeah,
And you've got short range tactical drones that are released by agents and operators. They're all different slightly, but pro-Ukrainian people in vicinity of the target. So they arrive at the same time the over-the-horizon stuff is coming in. There has been so much technical innovation, so much tactical innovation. They know what they're doing. You've got leaders like General Budanov, who is the only man in the world of whom I am jealous. And happy birthday, General. I would be delighted if you were listening to this. You are a big hero of mine. And the quality of the force he uses, the innovation, the confidence he shows in his subordinates, and they deliver for him. They deliver.
Yeah. Well, as you say, special forces are a big part of the Ukrainian force in Kursk. So we know that General Budanov has had his hand in what is going on in Kursk. This is going to be one of those quick hitting shows, Chuck. Like a Ukrainian designing a drone for a specific mission. Our mission today was to bring available updates about what is happening in Kursk to listeners here of indications and warnings. We will be back again this week with more news from Kursk. and very close looks at what is happening in Kurakova, what is happening in Prokhovsk, Velika Novosilka. Russians report that they are in control of Kurakova. Ukrainians report that there is still ongoing fighting in the village of Kurakova. And to the best of my knowledge, just a very quick summary on Prokhovsk, Chuck, the situation really hasn't changed since we reported about it 3 or 4 days ago.
No substantive changes, but we'll hit that. And in future and in developing as we go, Al and I are going to be delivering these quick hits. So focused and banging out on one. We'll also be taking periodic deep dives. I hate to say this. I often forget to say it, but hey, it's free to like this, and subscribing helps us. Alan and I are just discovering what an algorithm is. But if you can help us out, just click. It's free, and we'll keep coming at you with the best content we can put together.
And by the way, Chuck and I read your comments on the YouTube channel, and some of you have posed questions, and we're going to answer those questions in a future show this week. I mean, there's a very good question about desertion and problems in a Ukrainian unit trained in France. There have been questions about mobilization in Ukraine. So in your comments, don't hesitate to ask your questions. Chuck and I read them, and we will get to answers right here on Indications of Warning when we come back. But for now, we are concluding this show on day 1048 of Russia's full-scale genocidal invasion of Ukraine. Both Chuck and I will be here until that day of victory, when we can say, Slava Ukraini.
And until then, Heroyam Slava. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again pretty soon.